Good evening to all of you. Welcome to our third forum. Students, young Belizeans join in the story, the Belizean narrative. Earlier when we engaged in the meeting, we had the candle. And the candle has been with us since day one when we started Belizean history class. And it signals our story. It signals the stories that arose all throughout our history. So on behalf of the Belizean history class, I'm David Ruiz, and I will be moderating this session, the third forum, and I welcome the students, and I welcome our invited guests, who will also be facilitating the conversation in this forum, Mr. Giovanni Pinello and Dr. Filiberto Penados, who are no strangers to us. They've been very supportive of Belizean Studies, the program, and John Paul II Junior College in general. So before we begin, I will start with Meike, for Meike to introduce herself and to say a bit about her person, about the class, whatever you want to share, you go ahead and do so. Meike?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Meiki Zhao. I'm a student from John Paul II Junior College. I'm majoring in English, and my partner is Giovanni Pinello.
Thank you, Meiki. Aaron?
Okay. Good evening, guys. My name is Aaron Gongora, and I am currently majoring in theology and catechetics at John Paul II.
Thank you, Aaron. Alex?
Good night, everyone. My name is Alex Rosales, and I am a second-year student at JP2, and I am majoring in business major. And my partner is Eli Hernandez.
Thank you, Alex. Giovanni Jr.
Good evening. My name is Giovanni Pinello Jr. I am a second-year student at John Paul II Junior College, English major.
Thank you, Giovanni. Cynthia?
Good night, everyone. My name is Cynthia Torres. I am a second year at John Paul II, and I am majoring in business.
Last but not least, Noelia.
Good night, everyone. So my name is Noelia Hernandez. I'm majoring in business administration at John Paul II Junior College.
Yes, thank you, Noelia. And I would also like to introduce as annotator and timekeeper our good friend Justin Vera, who's been with us in the last three forums, and he will be invited at the very end to do the closing remarks. So welcome again, and we will start with Meiki and her group, her partner, to do the first presentation on the Belizean story, the narrative. Meiki?
Okay, so my partner is Meiki, and for our first essay, we decided to speak on the Garifuna story and their origins. So the story of the Garifuna people is one of constant fight against oppressors who continually sought to snatch away from them their homeland and their freedom, and of a search for greener pastures. They have fought against shackles, price tags, and labels, men differing in skin color but of equal value, and to this day continue to fight to preserve a precious culture that has survived through hardships for centuries. The changing times have inflicted deep wounds on the Garifuna, yet we have healed and achieved far greater things than what those who sought to step on us ever could have imagined. In Belize, we have a national public and bank holiday to commemorate the glorious day of the group led by Alejo Beni in 1832 that arrived at Sand Creek. we have achieved the UNESCO masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. And as the book by Dr. Joseph Palacio is entitled, Garifuna, A Nation Across Borders. The story of the Garifuna makes clear how and why the values and traditions that to this day remain as a principle of this culture are rooted. The story of the Garifuna begins from even 300 years before Europeans had arrived to this side of the world. South American natives migrated from the northern coast of that continent to the Antillean islands and intermingled with the native Carib population. Fast forward to the arrival of Europeans, who, along with their religion and ideologies, also brought disease, which nearly exterminated the Carib population. With the hospitality of the Garifuna that is still a characteristic today, African captives that had been shipwrecked off the coast of St. Vincent and escaped slavery were offered refuge by the Carib population on the island. In the 17th century, our Garifuna ancestors, or Black Caribs as they were referred to, resisted the efforts of the British and the French, who tried to take over the land and establish control. Led by paramount chief and hero to the day, Joseph Chatouille in 1796, and with some help from the French, carried out a revolt against the British, but the effort was futile, and in 1797 they were exiled from their own homeland. This was not the end, but rather the start of a new chapter, and contrary to the intentions of those who had exiled the Garifuna, they survived. The Garifuna culture extends from the south of Belize and along the coastal zone of Central America, but it remains connected through history, although separated by imaginary borders. The survivors spent days at sea as they sailed from St. Vincent to the island of Roatan in Honduras, where they settled and dispersed. As early as 1802, Garifuna presence was already visible in the south of British Honduras, or modern day Belize. On November 19th, 1832, the largest group of Garifuna seeking a new home away from the conflicts in Spanish Honduras arrived at Stan Creek and settled. This is commemorated as a national holiday since 1977, and to this day, due to the efforts of Thomas Vincent Ramos and Company, who through their efforts beginning in 1941 revitalized and highlighted the importance of recognizing history and identity. This occasion also constructs a reference for cultural and patrimonial sense of what ethnicity and culture is. Oral history and tradition plays an important part of the Garifuna culture, and it has survived because there is a consciousness of the possibility of it being lost if not taught to the newer generations. This forum is entitled Young Belizeans Join the Story, but we must highlight that we are already part of a story that began with our ancestors and is entrusted for us to learn the story, continue the story, and share the story to the generations to come so that they do the same. As young people joining, developing, and sharing the story, we can assure you that we appreciate history and regard it to the highest degree as we continue our search of our own Belizean identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giovanni and Meki, for that narrative on the Garifuna in Belize. We now move on to Aaron and
Okay.
his working partner.
Okay, hello guys. Let me get my essay right now. All right. So the first reflected essay will be about the Battle of St. George's Key. All right. Back then, 200 years ago, Spain managed to find and claim Belize first. Spain managed to somewhat capitalize Belize's sources, but eventually just left Belize alone until the British came to Belize. And the first British were known as Baymen. These these Baymen started to cut down logwood, but they had a treaty with Spain on how far they could cut down logwood before reaching the restricted area that Spain put on. But the Buccaneers violated the treaty, and Spain got furious and they started to plan to expel every Bayman in Belize. The Baymen knew of Spain's upcoming assault on them, so they had a public meeting to decide whether to flee from Spain's wrath or stay and defend Belize. 65 to 51 voted to stay and fight the Spaniards. They armed themselves and rallied up the troops. They even used slaves to aid them in the battle. Overall, they had a small militia army of 700 men and 7 gunboats ready, while Spain had 2,500 soldiers and sailors and 35 vessels. The battle seemed at one side, with Spain's overwhelming firepower and men, but the Bayman's commanders, Thomas Barrow and John Moss, gallantly slew Spain's grand army in a time period of 7 days, with Spain being in a full retreat at the end of the battle. The battle of St. George's Key represents the end of Spain's attempt to conquer the territory that is now known as Belize. Although this battle happened over 200 years ago, it still plays a large role in Belizean culture, as seen during the annual September celebration, when all the people over the country honor the Battle of St. George's Key, working together as a country, which can be seen during the independence movement and facing overwhelming odds, like, for example, voting whether to go to ICJ or not, and the COVID-19 that's happening right now. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron and Cynthia. You have walked us through, although superficially, but with deep reflection on the story of St. George's Key and the battle, the resistance of the Baymen against Spanish influence and conquest. We now move on to Alex and Noelia.
So hi everyone, the topic that Alex and I decided to do is slave treatment and resistance in Belize. Belize ethnic groups have a rich common history that makes our Belizean history a unique one, which we as citizens should appreciate and be proud of. Slavery is a history that we as Belizeans are most familiar with. We know that slaves were treated at some point in western part Africa. Yet, what makes the history of slavery interesting is our Belizean history. The circumstances they used to pass while being here in Belize, the miserable life that pops out to our mind when we hear the word slavery. After the transatlantic voyage, which was harsh and compassionate to think of, slaves were delivered to different countries of West Indies. Belize was one of the territories after Africa where Africa were sold at cheaper prices. Those who were in good health were sold at a higher price by the public venue in Belize town. Slave resistance in Belize territories occurred several times. Labor exploitation was one of the many causes that caused many slaves to revolt. Adolphe Joseph Lino, in his book African Civilization, says that in the Belizean territory there is evidence of 4 slave revolts between 1760 to 1820. The reason for this was due to the inhuman treatment slaves used to receive. There are many instances of horrible barbarity there, says Chaplin. Slaves received inhuman treatment by the masters when slaves refused to obey the rules or orders given by them. Many of them were punished to the point where disobedience can cost a slave life. The pattern on Belize wasn't easy. Many slaves kept practicing their own culture and tradition, although they were in a foreign land. Our native roots are something that every individual shall not forget. However, this is a problem that most of our society cannot stick to. As time went by, slaves started gaining more population, and they were gaining some privileges and rights. This was some effect that the slave revolts had left. After slaves started confronting their masters, each gender was assigned different tasks. Males were mostly dedicated to forestry, while women played a role in household. Children and elderly people were in charge of the agricultural sector. This was some privilege that older slaves were granted due to their age. In 1833, the Abolition Act introduced the apprentice system. The Abolition Act only benefited the white farmers who lost their capital after the abolition of slaves. The apprenticeship system was slavery. All ex-slaves and new captives brought to the Caribbean territory became apprentice laborers. They used to work without pay by this time. This means slavery abolition did not end it at all. Barbara Flores mentions that slaves were colonized, but they decolonized themselves. How this story impacts me is that although slaves passed through difficult moments, their perseverance made them stronger. They persevere and continue with their revolts in 4 different occasions so that they can be granted what they wished for, liberty. Their culture remained the same even though they were in different lands. The lesson of life that we can learn from the slavery history is that everyone is the same no matter where you come from, your culture, your race, color, or language. Everyone should treat one another equally and respect their dignity and privilege that one has as human being. As young Belizean reflecting on the pattern of slavery here in Belize, I can say we are a lucky generation, a generation that is fortunate to live in this modern era. I can bet many of us don't know what it means to do hard labor like how slaves used to do. For this reason, all we can say is thank you. This thank you is for the abolition of slavery, for it exists no more. As young Belizeans, our job is to continue telling our history so that it doesn't just stay as memories of the past, but make it present every single day, so that it works as a motivation to continue the hard work as to how our ancestors used to do it in this territory named Belize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noelia and Alex, for that reflection on the story of the enslaved Africans in Belize. Now we move on to our first set of questions, and here I would like to invite everybody to join in the conversation. And you are welcome to build on what the other panelists are contributing. Meiki, we have gone through the three stories that have been presented on the Garifuna, the Battle of St. George's Key, and the enslaved Africans, the story of slaves, of slavery. Meiki, you share a cultural heritage from two places, right? Your family coming from the East, from Asia, and you are now living in Belize. Tell me, Meiki, having gone through social, the Belizean studies class, have you felt any change in your attitudes, mentality as a Belizean? How has this course in Belizean studies affected you or changed you in this awareness of what it is, what it means to be a Belizean?
I think it doesn't matter which culture I am at or in. But however, like my origin and identity and everyone's identity and origin is still like part of our roots. And in order for us to engage in that or like incorporate people within that bond, what's important is like for us to acknowledge the human or like human importance or values. And there, you're asking about the difference between the two cultures. I would say that the Chinese tradition, some part of it, like because I'm living down south, that I think that there are some mentality that is like really solid minded. When they think of one thing, they're saying like this thing is right and you have to do it this way. Whereas like coming over to a foreign country, I see that people is like pretty much open minded to different opportunities and like things that they think that there's a chance for it and there's a way to do it another way. In like that code saying there's a will, there's a way. So I do think that it changes my perspective in some of this open-minded ways.
And going back to my second question, I guess it had many views and many underlying questions to what I said. No, but having gone through the Belizean Studies course, do you see yourself? How has the stories that we have gone through in the course, has that accentuated the way you feel as a Belizean? Has it changed that? Has it made you more aware?
I think the more that I learned and the more that I engage in like accepting different knowledges of the truth of what I have been taught, um, I'm like more in depth, um, like knowing the importance of different culture and like the way of their like qualities. It really like teach me something new in life.
Okay, all right. Aaron, what about you? Um, has Belizean studies done anything in that regard to how you feel as a Belizean? I mean, you went through primary school here and you probably did in high school Belizean history, but has there been a change in you? What do you say?
Well, I'd say the people in our country that kind of like contributed to Belize independence, all the way back starting from since the first colonizer in Belize and leading up to the independence. Um, the point of that is that people, no matter which kind of ethnic group, kind of work together to accomplish a same goal that everyone's going on. But but the opposite side, the irony of it as well, that nowadays each ethnic group kind of like frown upon each other, hide themselves from something else, which I kind of find a little ridiculous because I feel like our forefathers did not envision this for us to be fighting each other for who's what and who's in, you know. And ironically, like, they as well helped to build a country overall, though.
Okay. Cynthia and Alex, no, the question is for you as well. We heard stories from the Garifuna, St. George's Key, the slavery resistance, and that theme of resistance surfaces in all of these stories. Cynthia, let's begin with you. As a young Belizean, we can look back at these stories and we can see this theme of fighting back, no, of resisting to domination. As a young Belizean, what do you think are the new forms of colonization that your generation is engaged in, that you need to resist? So there are two aspects to the questions. If you can tell us, and then this goes for Alex as well, what is one example of a new form of colonization these days that we're faced with, and how can your generation fight it back?
Well, I will say how are we colonizing in Belize is due to the fact that I will use the example again because in the beginning of the class I mentioned that we are colonized by the English people, especially in England. So I will use the example of the currency. Um, if we were an independent country to some extent, why don't we have like the image of a national hero on our currency instead of the Queen Elizabeth II? Um, Also, I will say we're colonized in different forms. For example, labor. Um, um, in addition, I would say tourism is an example of how we are colonized since we are selling our lands to foreigners who want to invest here in Belize. And in that way, we like, to some extent, if George Price was alive, we will disappoint him because what he wanted for us is that we Belizeans um, cultivate and work our nation, and that is something that we as Belizeans are failing to do, and that's a way how we are colonized as well by foreigners.
Okay, so you feel that as Belizeans, um, we need to be faithful to what George Price advocated,
Yeah,
which was the mixed economy, the land,
yeah,
cultivating the land, farming.
yeah.
So Cynthia, what do you feel? Do you think tourism, as Alex says, is totally negative, or do you have something else to add? What other sort of colonization you think is worth resisting? Cynthia, you're muted. You're muted.
Well, I think that we are colonized also by the government because the government tell us what to do, and we follow the laws that they put on us, and we don't have a lot of our own rights.
So can you give us an example of what you feel is unfair that the government says that we should resist?
Well, when an example would be when we don't have the minimum wage that we should be paid, and others work harder and they get a lower wage.
Okay. But
Um,
I think we have the Department of Labor, no, that we can go and complain, right?
Yeah, but
Mr.
to
David,
add
may
on,
I add something else
Tell
to
me,
it?
Aaron.
I'd say another thing that's still colonizing us is we. I'm not sure if it's majority, but I know there's a lot of people that still have that mentality that, oh, England or the British will come and help us or aid us. Um, like an example would be when we got our independence, gone lot did threats on Belize of invading. So well, people ask, or I think I can't recall well if it's one of the requirements, but the British Army stayed behind and defend in case for any invasion. And as well nowadays, so in the present day, which last year happened for the ICJ, a lot of people are saying no because they can't invade us because England will come in and help us and protect us from any invasion or anything atrocity that Guatemala may do. So that's why you need to vote no. That's what people were saying. I'd say that's my opinion to it.
So it's resistance against mindsets,
Hmm.
right? Against what is culturally ingrained in us. This cultural malpractices and mentalities. Noelia, thank you, Aaron. Noelia, how do you feel about um, handouts, when government gives handouts, the hampers, the food hampers? In Noelia, for example, and this is a question for Giovanni Jr. as well, no? We're in a crisis, COVID-19, and many people have lost their jobs, and many people, many groups are giving out hampers, food hampers. How do you feel about that? Noelia, Giovanni?
I think to some extent it's kind of our duty as citizens to look after each other. So it's not really like, well, it's us coming together to support those who really need it. So I don't really see anything negative about it. Well, whereas it's very positive because it's the community working for the community.
Okay, Noelia?
Well, to some degree, I also agree with Giovanni because I think this virus is causing us everyone to get together and be united as one and help each other. So, but as well, the government should be helping because there are a lot of poverty here in Belize, not only in Belize but around the world, and I think they should always be putting their part in. You know?
What about if we were to, God forbid, but if we were to get a second wave of the virus, and we have to tighten back with a lockdown? I mean, the question is it fine to go on and on and on with food hampers? How long will we be able to sustain that?
With what, mister?
The food distribution, food distribution.
It's
Well,
not gonna last a long. It's not gonna last, you know, because we're not fully prepared, and our economy is not ready for all of these things, not even economically or medically.
well,
So
We
you
what?
have to
see,
find.
Yes, Giovanni?
I think this will last as long as people have this mentality that they need to give. So until people like get tired of I'm always giving, I don't have enough now. So then that's when people, the ones that got, they need to give back. So it's like hoy por ti, mañana por mí. That kind of mentality that we need to have. And I don't. And if we do have that mentality, I don't think it would ever need to stop.
But do you think, although food distribution is needed, especially for those who are in need, who lost their jobs, where does empowerment, where is empowerment left? Where does empowerment has its place? My question is, how can we empower? Is food distribution empowering people?
To some degree, I would say no, because they are being dependent on someone else, and that's what we as a country we don't want. We want to be dependent.
Okay.
I would say that we are not a country that produce, but we like import products from foreign, so that will be like a disadvantage for our nation to confront this virus in like in the food hamper, as you said.
Did you muted yourself? Okay. We can, I'm sure Dr. Penados and Filiberto will, sorry, Mr. Giovanni will follow up on the conversation. Our time is up. We are going to move into our second paper, and we will start with Giovanni, your COVID experience on the lockdown. You know, we are going through this crisis. The crisis is not finished, it's not over. Many are talking about the new norm, things that will no longer be the same. Story
Okay, about
on the
COVID-19.
lockdown, the COVID-19 experience. So we will start with Giovanni. Yeah, well, Giovanni and Makey.
The first COVID-19 cases were confirmed in Belize, the country went into shock as well. All knew that this would happen sooner or later, as all countries in the region were confirming cases. The state of emergency lockdown has had its pros and cons in relation to our lives. As students were still able to get our schoolworks done through online class using our mobile devices. However, many laborers were unable to work or left jobless. We could tell that the majority of the populations was in a financial crisis. It has been a hard battle that we had to fight, not only community or as a country, but on a global scale. And the positive side is the increased supplies of healthcare equipment and doctors from Cuba, which provided a sense of security for the people that if anything were to happen to them, they will have this intensive care units to go to with adequate supplies and healthcare professionals. This experience had made us realize that it is an even difficult situation for the elderly who are vulnerable not to not only the COVID virus, but also to the economic and social effects that the virus has brought. In the case of the heartwarming action of food contributions to the people who are in most need, we acknowledge that there are people who care for their neighbors. But what if these contributors choose not to do so? There are elderly persons who do not have any family members living with or close to them, making it difficult for them to receive aid. It is a difficult situation for an elderly person to go through. And again, because of this COVID situation, the majority is being forced to face financial crisis. Some receive fund aids from the government while others cannot qualify for it. The majority of those who are receiving the government aid were working before the COVID crisis. But where do those who were unemployed before the situation stand? If their economic status was poor before, how does it stand now? In contrast, two positives that have arisen from this pandemic is the cooperations with one another, the obedience of the population to willingly stay at home to prevent the virus from spreading, and the use of technology as a platform for work and educational purposes more than we had been used to. In terms of corporations during the current lockdown, it makes us imagine unity. What if the unity of the country of Belize were to be as strong as it has been during this crisis? What would Belize look like? It is clear that if we were to have this unity outside of the circumstances we're living, we would surely prosper and flourish under the shade, as the saying on our coat of arms goes. The use of technology has contributed greatly and has been big help during this difficult time. It has stood out and has been more efficiently used to
Can somebody send her a message? Are you listening? Make it, we lost you.
many friends.
Make Makey,
Yes.
you went mute. You like went mute for a minute there.
Oh, I think it's unstable connection. Where did I lost you guys?
Like 2 minutes, like 30 seconds ago.
Es lo net, maestro.
In contrast, the two positives.
Es lo net.
Yeah, go ahead
Okay.
from
In
there.
contrast, two positives that has arisen from this pandemic is the cooperations with one another, the obedience of the population to willingly stay at home to prevent this virus from spreading, and the use of technology as a platform for work and educational purposes more than what we had been used to. In terms of cooperation during the current lockdown, it makes us imagine unity. What if the unity of the country of Belize were to be as strong as it had been during this crisis? What would Belize look like? It is clear that if we were to have this unity outside of the circumstances we're living, we would surely prosper and flourish under the shade, as the saying on our coat of arms goes. The use of technology has contributed greatly and has been big help during this difficult time. It stood out and has been more efficiently used than ever. Technology has not only helped all of us get our work done quickly, orderly, and in a more convenient ways, but also help us to stay connected when we can't meet any friend or visit any relatives face to face. Lastly, we believe that every situation that we face will teach us something new, despite the level of good or bad. It is true that this COVID-19 virus has taken a toll on all of our lives, and we cannot control it. apart from following the recommendations of medical professionals. It is both unpredictable and heartbreaking. However, this difficult time should serve as a lesson and a reminder for us that unity is crucial, that we should not strive to unite when times are good, but also when we're in the most difficult times. To achieve real unity, we must leave differences aside and focus on delivering the good for all. We have seen the struggles of the Garifuna at St. Vincent, the Maya at Tipu, and further north, in order to protect and preserve their land and their culture despite adversity, and we should learn from them and their unity, as Sister Barbara's Flora states, in quotation, the ancestors' amazing story of struggle and survival can become key narratives to help us gather our collective strength, to help us build on a solid foundation of core traditions for the rebuilding of a new sense of self. My partner and I are sure that we would not want to be remembered as the generations that give up because of selfishness or ignorance, but rather we would want to be remembered as the generations that overcame a deadly virus and was able to unite entire nations through knowledge, wisdom, and unity.
Thank you very much, Meike and Giovanni. We now move on to Aaron and Cynthia.
Being under lockdown can be seen as being in prison with nothing to do or think. This pandemic has impacted many of our lives in little and huge ways, but for some, it has helped us, I included, to reflect on the better things in life that are yet to come. The experience that I am facing is not so easy for me and my family. We are going through difficult times that me think that there's a simple reason for it and we cannot find the words to express that reason. During this pandemic, I am seeing and learning that we need to be more united and help each other more, especially in these difficult times we are living through. We shouldn't let this pandemic be the breaking point of our unity and integrity. Another experience that I had was not being able to go and visit my grandfather and other family members. It disheartens me because I cannot imagine what they have been doing to survive slash outlast this pandemic. I can't do anything in helping them get the food or supplies that they need. This make me, this makes me have a sense of not being helpful at all. This as well made me reflect on how others around the country are coping through this pandemic, especially for their loved ones that are far away and cannot take care of themselves. This pandemic has shown me that me and others that we sometimes take things we have for granted. For me personally, going to school at times, I didn't want to go to classes because I simply was not interested or had the motivation to go. Now, ironically, I long to go to class, to learn more, have the constant support of my teacher and friends, and having the company of friends that I haven't seen in a long time. Another thing that I learned from this pandemic is that there are two types of people in this world. They are the ones that helps others and is selfless in these hard times, while the others in hoard, greedy, and selfish. The selfless ones put others first and help their people around in whatever needs, while the selfish one can be that one person that throws a party of 20 plus people in it, entering everything, getting disease, or they literally buy everything in a grocery store so none can have the necessary supplies to live. A strength I see in Belize is that the people in our beloved country are selfless. We as Belizeans are not fighting over supplies or necessity like the United States, where people are literally fighting, killing each other for a roll of TP or face mask. Another strength we have is that we managed to beat COVID-19 in Belize, something that not even well-developed countries can do. But just like everything in the world, we have weaknesses in Belize during this pandemic. Firstly, our government. They could have prevented COVID-19 coming to Belize in the first place, but no, they kept our international airport open. Even when we got our first case, it took them a few weeks to shut it down. Another weaknesses we experience in Belize is not respecting protocols established from this pandemic. People constantly keep breaking curfew, don't wear masks when outside, or major social gathering of 10 plus people. This is how the outbreak started in Belize. Someone with COVID threw a party of 70 plus in it and managed to infect two others, and from there they infect a couple more. Now in my community there's a constant worry that we will be a food shortage or famine in Cala Creek, and we somewhat have they on salt a church community on the donations that they often give to the community. Another problem that arose from this pandemic in my community is that there are people starting to become too relaxed with this disease. Even since we became COVID-free, things are slowly opening. Rivers are now open to the public. People go and flocks to the river to swim, which is the purpose, but mainly to drink and not use a mask. We must obey the regulations the government has placed in Belize if we want to continue being COVID-free and not share the same fiat as other countries that are struggling to combat this disease.
Thank you very much, Cynthia and Aaron, for that reflection on COVID-19, your experience during the lockdown. We now move on to Noelia and Giovanni. Sorry, Alex. Noelia.
COVID-19 impact on me and the society. Yeah. Before moving on with my reflection, I would like to express my condolences to those affected by COVID-19, especially to those two Belizeans who were not able to make it in combating this virus. I'm thankful to those essential workers who are putting all their effort in controlling this virus. As a Belizean, I can say that that the year 2020 will be marked in history, and especially in the hearts of those who lost their loved ones due to this pandemic. Honestly, this lockdown made me feel like a prisoner, yet it was and continues to be for our own sake. With this lockdown, I was able to notice many people critique the government due to the measures they were making in our nation. However, in my point of view, I think they have been doing a great job in controlling this virus that affected the entire world. Wearing a face mask is not something that we Belizeans are accustomed to, but it has become a style, modern style. Catalamesa said that we are attacked by an invisible demon that is not looking for any race, color, gender, religion. If you're poor or wealthy people, what it has made is that it has united the human race to start believing in God and has united ourselves more closer to Him. This is an exodus that being united in the human race. A lesson of life that this pandemic has taught, as well as many of us, solution for everything. This mortal virus has led our economy into a serious crisis. The Belizean government has been making loans and getting into debts, which we, the citizens, are going to pay back in our taxes. So far, each Belizean has a huge debt. that continues increasing with the debt that our country is getting into. Yet, what got me upset, and as well as many other Belizeans, is that those who didn't need the help during this lockdown were the first ones to get the relief through their bank accounts. Moving on, technology and scientific capacities failed as well as the economic and political development. Experts have not found the antidote for this virus thus far. Furthermore, has taught us that it is better safe than sorry, and that we as citizens must be aware of who we are electing to rule in our government. Why am I saying this? If Belize had closed, if Belize had closed its borders in time, Belize would have had no case of COVID-19 nor any disease at all. This will be a weakness that we face as a nation. Another weakness is that we unexpectedly received this virus as a country. We were not prepared financially or economically and medically. We, did, we didn't have the special resources to test COVID-19. Our doctors were prepared, but not in a professional way, as those well-developed countries. Therefore, Belize resorted to the help of different countries, such as Guatemala for medicine, Taiwan for financial help, and Cuban doctors. In the case of our politician, well, in my area, I have not seen our representative giving out that $50 like how they used to give when election days was approaching. Trends that we encounter as a nation is that there was unity of our Belizean people. Cooperation was visible in our society. We witnessed that Belize was one of the last countries to get infected and the first in Central America region to get recovered. This is because people could take the situation seriously, as well as the government, who took swift and strong measures for the sake of Belize. In our community, I was able to see cooperation from our people. Many assisted others with food, especially those who are in most need and are currently unemployed. Those who are not able to get any funds from the government relief or food assistance, let us thank our Catholic Church in our community for providing food to almost 600 families weekly just in our town, and other development service in Belize who are also assisting with food to other families that were in great need throughout the country. The previous point that many who assisted with food assistance, they snap pictures just to brag on social media. My perspective towards this is, who cares if you are helping or not? If someone wants to help, there is no need to brag about it in the media. The philanthropic act is not based on charity anymore, but an act of gaining a good reputation. Besides, many followed the regulation to confront this virus, yet many disobeyed the rules at the beginning of the curfew. Stubbornness is a weakness in our community. Education was affected, but it wasn't a big deal since our government was able to find out solutions for our 2020 academic year. In conclusion, as it was mentioned in the article of the Mandala, we can change the course of our history for ourselves. We can decide our directions, move the development processes in ways that are meaningful for us, and measures success in terms of what we value as a nation or find. So it is up to us citizens if we want to keep our Belize free from COVID-19. Cooperation of the people is mostly needed, as well as unity that we must have as a nation to confront the current situation which we are facing at the moment. It is time for our organ human race to start and strengthen our relationship with God, since He is our only Savior. Thank you. Amen.
I was muted. Thank you, Noelia and Alex. I now invite Dr. Penados to start the conversation after listening to all of you sharing your COVID experience essays.
Thank you, Mr. David, and thank you to all of you, and congratulations for coming to the end of your program and for preparing these presentations that you offered us today. I have two questions, really, and then we'll see what happens. One of the themes that you have been talking about in your class and tonight as well has been around this question of colonization and or colonialism. And I wanted to hear from you and think about it. So give it some thought, right? How does a decolonized Belize look like to you? So that would be my first question. How does a decolonized Belize look like to you? And perhaps you can tell me why you're saying that. It's not a test question, so just share your thoughts, right? Don't be scared.
I will say that when we speak about decolonize, like we mean like to contribute to our own history. Then, like for example, in the article of which I can remember, Barbara Flores, it says that let's use the example of schools before, like they were Americanized, and like in books, most books were brought from the US. So basically students were learning um, history to some extent about a foreign country, but not about our country, which is Belize. So in that case, we need to Belizeanize our citizens or our people so that we can know our roots, histories, and since Belize is has different ethnic groups where share our own like unity and traditions. Like I don't know how to express more about.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So maybe I could have lots of questions for you too, but I want to hear from other people. You know, what are your thoughts? Maybe you agree or you want to add to what Alex has shared about what a decolonized Belize looks like.
Well, I think to find that out, you first need to understand what colonization is. And so colonization would be to take control or appropriate yourself from something that belongs to someone else. And I think that colonization itself isn't good in any way. So to combat that, we need to go back to our values, the values that we have been taught, not in school or any other place, but at home. The teaching of values comes from home. And I've been lucky enough to have been taught the best values and to respect what's mine and what's not mine. So I think uh, a decolonized Belize would be a place where values are put over property. So we need to go back to what we've been taught at home. Values, respect, the what you would be taught by your grandparents, your parents. Yeah, so to imagine a decolonized Belize would be a place not where there's no control, but rather the respect for authority and respect for values.
Right. So I hear two things. I mean, from Alex, one of the things that captured my attention was that he said that we had to Belizeanize our curriculum, right? I guess we have to. So in a sense, that what that tells me, or why that resonates with me, is because it sort of speaks to the idea of thinking Belize from Belize, right? Thinking Belize from Belize. And then Giovanni was talking about taking back control, right? So I want to combine those two things. So what taking back control is a little bit like thinking Belize from Belize, right? So maybe combining those two issues for the rest of you who haven't shared your thought. What does it mean to think Belize from Belize, or what would it mean to take back control?
I think it will be gaining our real identity and doing what Belizeans do and not doing what, for example, the Americans do, because the majority of us do like American culture, like Halloween or other stuff, instead of focusing on our Belizean tradition and culture. So I think that would be one of the most important things by Belizeanizing ourselves.
Okay, so sort of not adopting other people's identities or cultures, sort of like
Our
celebrating
own
Halloween
culture.
and doing our own. Okay, anybody else wants to jump in?
To add a little bit about what Noelia said, I will agree with that because nowadays, like we can see, well, especially our Belizean, most of our says the Belizean people, like they how can they adapt to the modernization nowadays. Like they forget like about their roots or traditions. Like for example, in this new era of technology, like they like our Belizean people, like they don't do that hard work that our ancestors used to do before, but they like have everything simple then with technology.
Okay, all right. So maybe ask a couple more questions since you're on this discussion. There's several people who write about colonialism, and they talk about how, in fact, more than talking about colonialism, they talk about coloniality, right? And they use the word coloniality to emphasize that colonialism rested and gave rise to a pattern of power, a way of exercising power that consists of two elements, right? One of them is racism. They talk about is the social construction of biological difference. And I was taking biological differences, okay, and organizing them into a hierarchy in which some people are more important than others. So white people at the top, mixed people, then black and indigenous people somewhere there at the bottom. So they became a hierarchy. But it's not only the people themselves, but everything that is associated with the people. In other words, their values, their ways of being human, their ways of knowing the world, their ways of doing things. All of that becomes devalued. It becomes less. What is important is somebody else's idea, generally European culture. So if you think about Western science, Western philosophy, all of those seem to be more valuable, right, than say an indigenous cosmology or Mayan religion. All of those seem to be less. They seem to be less important. So there's a hierarchy. That's one way of exercising power. The other one is actually the subjugation of land and resources into global capital, such that land and labor did no longer serve the local people, but serve somebody else. So in a sense, the slave lost his capacity or her capacity to work for him or herself, no longer producing to sustain themselves and their families, but actually to serve somebody else. And two, the land that, say, for example, in Belize was no longer used to plant corn. In fact, planting corn was considered to be destructive, but rather it was to harvest mahogany. So land, labor, and resources becomes important only within global capital, right? So those two things are same. So remember that. Have you seen the movie Black Panther? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Yep. So, all right. So in Black Panther, in a sense, it reflects what is called an Afro future. So it's a future imagined by African people. Okay. So in a sense, they're using um, African values, African history, African culture to build, to imagine a future for Black people. That's an imaginary one. So I wanted to do a little exercise and imagine a future for Belize that draws on its African, Garifuna, Maya history. What do you see?
Mm,
Could be anything crazy. It's an imaginary world.
I would say it will be more about unity.
Okay.
Because if we focus on the movie Black Panther, where we see that a tribe is like or has a well-developed economy, like technologies in advance. Well, if we like put Belize in that case, where we can say we are not prepared right now, but maybe if we as a country get united, like maybe to some extent in the future we can make that possible. However, we are not like we don't have all the resources, as I said. So in that case, we will depend on another country, like for example, a developed one, and in that case will be the two most like rich country, which is the U.S. and China. That those countries where they are well developed economically, they have technology in advance. So Belize will like is inferior to that, as you said, in coloniality.
Right.
Where Belize has at the moment Belize has like its product will be like a low quality in comparison to that of those developed countries. That's my opinion.
But don't you think that we think that we don't have those things because we're comparing to, as you said, China and the US? In other words, like in Black Panther, the future that is imagined there is different. It's imagined from an African culture. So if we compare ourselves to China and the US, maybe we don't have anything, but maybe we have other things that we could build from.
Well, at
No,
the
okay, you want
moment, I
to
don't see Belize as uh, advancing technology.
Hmm.
take for example, we eat chaya in this part of the country. We eat a lot of chaya, right? I mean, I imagine you do. I eat chaya. I imagine you do, right? That's something that we have. But maybe we buy all of this, what are they called? This energy drinks, right? We buy energy drinks, we buy all of these things. And we have moringa that we imported from somewhere, okay? Because it's not native to Belize. But could we imagine doing things with what we have? Like, I don't know, just thinking of Aya because that came to my mind.
I
Um,
think that.
well, sorry, see?
Dale tú, dale.
Okay, guys. Well, I feel like, in my opinion, we probably have had our independence a long time ago than the 1980s, maybe probably in 1800 or 1900, most likely, and with all the resources and the people working together, rather than it being just us a step at a time for every century or 50 years or so.
Right.
Sorry, what?
No. I'm agreeing with you, definitely. I mean, yeah. Anybody else wants to jump in? We haven't heard from the female students. I want to hear a female perspective.
Even though I have not watched Black Panther before, the viewers say that choose the African ancestors or people into a place to show their cultural things, or like in the colonization how they would rule. I think it would be perfectly in peaceful and in unity, because specifically on African, and we see the cultural aspects, the outer and the inner parts, and it just seems like in the inner part their bond and behavior and everything in the family bond is just really peaceful and sweet, whereas in the outer part it's just so vivid, and there's a lot to tell, and everything has like a symbolism for certain things, like example the drum, and it just have a lot of stories to tell, or important significance of it to show people in the world.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So it would depart from the values and the resources that people have. Kind of Giovanni spoke about the importance of values, right? So obviously it would depart from those values, those African, those Mayan, those Garifuna values that we have, which might be different than the ones that we have in mainstream society, right? Ms. David, I know somebody is monitoring the time, so I don't want for us to go beyond time. So just can you tell us when to stop and move on?
Okay, let's listen to Noelia. She has something to say.
I think I agree with all of you guys, because as you said, Mr. Penados, that I think we'll be all in unity, and we'll be focusing on our own resources that we want, that we have, that are available then in our country, and then in that way we'll be becoming more independent and not self-dependent on others.
Mm-hmm. All right. So maybe just one last thought before we go, Mr. David. Over the past couple of days, I've been listening to some of the other students, and one of the things that I hear often is that colonialism kind of divided and conquered us. And while there is some truth to that, if you think about it, I mean, Belize became Belize as a population-wise through the colonial process of bringing Garifuna people and African people and added to Maya people there. So I don't know that there was unity, that as if unity existed already. These are different people, right? With their own different cultures. So I guess what I want to say with that is that perhaps it's not so much that unity was in the past, but that unity is in the future. Yeah, but as a people, we have mestizos, Garifuna, Maya. We never really, this is my view, we never really had an opportunity to build unity prior to independence. We never did. We were put together. It's like somebody came and drew a line around us, and that's it. This is Belize now. But we haven't had the opportunity, or maybe we do now, okay, to build that unity. And I'm wondering, how do we do that? We're not going to get into that discussion, but that was something, the next question that I was going to ask. Thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you very much, Filiberto, for that first part of the conversation in segment 2. We would like to listen from everybody, so feel free to join in the conversation at any point in time. We now invite Ms. Giovanni Pinello to engage our students, our panelists, in this last part of the second segment, and we have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Dave. Dr. Penados and the students of AP2. Um, Thanks again. We're in the last round of the forum. And listening to you all tonight, I have come up with this. I noticed that one of the major concepts that you have brought out is this dichotomy, this idea of something, but it gets divided along the lines. So, for example, you have a tree. The tree is supposed to represent one, but eventually that tree begins to have branches. And so I asked the question, is that still a tree or is it now a divided tree? So what I hear from you all are a series of stories, our stories, um, which feature topics such as from the Garifuna, the idea of consciousness and values and identity. Um, uh, we hear about enslavement and freedom, colonization and independence, the celebration of a battle. Yet we see one of the things that I come up with is this idea of, and then we hear your stories about COVID-19 and the unity that has been showcased. But I consider that what you have presented tonight is actually a theme, a topic that allows for dichotomy. You have been seeing one side of the story to a large extent. And I know that Capenados was challenging you all. How do you see an independent Belize having gotten rid of the colonialism? And while you have tried to answer it, I think there are key things to bring out. So I'm going to ask, since you had worked in partnerships, I want to start off by asking you guys and general, on topics such as the unity and the selfishness. That's the dichotomy, the opposites, unity and selfishness, because somebody brought out the concept of greed that is ongoing during this pandemic. And somebody saying, no, the government is doing well and the people are united. Is that really so? And can you point out at least one example where that dichotomy of, yes, unity among ourselves, yes, helping out each other is fine, but there's also that element of creating a dependency? What will happen when the groups, such as Red Cross, Help Age, even the politicians or the politricians, we should say. I know somebody was upset that he hasn't seen his area rep for a good while. We haven't seen him for a good while for true. Uh, but he has his operative somewhere around and they jump houses because of, you understand what I mean by the dichotomy? We're supposed to be one, yet are we? And so I wanted to bring out for you this idea that I clearly recall. Look at San Pedro. San Pedro and Borges Key having reported the first instance of COVID-19 in Belize. And when you went on Facebook and you saw when it was revealed who was the first person to be diagnosed with COVID-19 in Belize, there were all these concepts of wanting to burn the young lady and even her mother who got infected too. Is that the real unity that you were talking about? Anybody comment? Did anyone note that?
Oelia, raise your hand.
So I think that the unity that we were pointing at is the unity of all of the community that we're helping each other, like the Catholic Church, the government in some way they're helping as well. But just as you said, it left me thinking that we didn't focus on that, and that is true. And I didn't think of it at first until right now, but I don't know. It's a difficult thing to answer because we were only focusing on the people then, not on the people that had the COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Noelia. And that's the idea of forums like this, where we get to see other sides of the story. Someone else wants to speak about that?
I think the intention of the people who's trying to kill this person who's affected by COVID is really evil. And the point of unity is what they're doing oppositely, and that's what we need as in unity, as like an opposite way of doing without the intention of killing them. We'll find ways to how to cure them and cure Belize as a whole, that in prevention they would go out to spread the virus and infect more people.
Okay, thanks, Mikey. Aaron, you brought out the topic of the Battle of St. George's Key, which is one of those things I've been working along with Dr. Angel Cal and Dr. Herman Bird and some professors from the University of Quintana Roo. And you spoke words to the effect regarding the BSGC, the Battle of St. George's Key, as having being or as being one of those aspects of national culture. Again, I see the dichotomy that happens. If you've ever been, well, I guess by now you're all familiar. The 10th of September is not what it used to be. You ever thought about that as part of the critique that you could have added to your that you could add to your presentation? Unity was supposed to be for the 10th, no? But we clearly see a divisibility. You want to comment on that, anyone? And by I wasn't saying the visibility, I'm saying divisibility, the division that exists. And beyond the Battle of St. George's Key Independence. Anyone wants to comment? Seems like you're all tired. All right, well,
Well,
yes, Alex.
that is kind of a question, but I will say, can I ask a question? No me contesta. No me escuchó.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? The
Yes.
question, okay, the question or the commentary is, the Battle of St. George's Key was used previously to unite the people of Belize. But along the way, the same event has created in us a disunity. There's a division. Would you comment on that? Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's always going to be a this division in every aspect, because there's, as we analyze stories, there's three parts to a story: what we see, what actually happened, and what the other person sees. So there's always going to be a divisibility in every situation. How to handle it would be different because there's difference in the three stories. Of course, we the truth isn't always known because not everybody will know the truth.
Of light on it. However, the more we learn and the more we are able to share, the better it should be for other people to, as we share, to understand each other. Meiki was speaking about her place of living and her background, and how in traditionally the Chinese seem to be strict, but you saw a change coming into Belize, and Belizeans being kind of like more open-minded, you know. So these are some of the things that we need to look at. One of you mentioned about people giving out, helping out other individuals in during this time, and I came up with a phrase, no, some time ago, that this is when people take their photographs that they're giving away things. It's pharisaical philanthropy. The word is philanthropy, right? Philantropy, but I've changed the position of the second H, and it becomes pharisaical, like the Pharisee, you know. And instead of philanthropy, it now becomes philanthropy. And that in itself, I was trying to bring out the idea that the more you give, the more it creates a dependency. Some individuals will wait only to be given. And we see politicians taking advantage of that because they keep on giving. It's like people who are alcoholics. You give them a little drink every day, and they're kept happy. Not knowing that if they sober up well enough to work, to regain their dignity, at some point they can buy more than a sip, more than a chaparrita, you know. So those are some of the things that I've been picking up from your presentations. That idea of mental slavery, which exists, that getting rid of the colonial mentality. Yes, enslavement, slavery was abolished, but mentally we have not gotten there yet. And it's going to take young people like yourselves to start looking at other aspects. I know I'm getting a signal about I have a few minutes only. So let me recommend to you a story. I've done with with all groups. I like to read, you know. There's a book, there's a short story. You can actually download it from anywhere online. And it's called Gentlemen of the Jungle. Gentlemen of the Jungle. It's a story written by Jomo Kenyatta, an African leader who led Kenya into independence. There's also another story that I like, and it's called The Spider's Web. The Spider's Web by Leonard Kibera. And it's a story about this guy who used to be a servant in, and it's an African short story. He used to be a servant in the master's house, and what happens when the masters leave, and who takes over. It's a beautiful story for you to consider how the mental enslavement that goes on continues to be a threat to the unity that we are seeking. Okay? And finally, I want to just bring out this idea, this concept that in your stories, they are the stories of resistance, whether They're stories of picking up and moving on. They're stories of not being complacent. There are stories of a consciousness that takes over. And it is that which you, young people, need to begin to fight. And I don't say fight in the sense of physical, but to push for. That should be one of your motivators. It should be one of those things that you should aim for, to share, to speak, to engage people, to challenge them, to look at the dichotomies, and to really begin to shape what Belize is. To really make you young Belizeans not only join, not only follow, but lead and create a better Belize. My take.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giovanni, for this second part, for engaging us in this second and final part of the forum. Young Belizeans join in the Belizean narrative, the Belizean story. I will now call on Meike to say her final words.
What I wanted to say is that I appreciate everything that I learned in this course. And most importantly, I hope that it has achieved our school college motto. We teach you how to think, not what to think. And everyone has demonstrated their perceptions and continue doing that towards the good so that you can be better leaders for Belize.
Thank you very much, Meike. Aaron?
Okay, I'll be quite frank, but I honestly don't like the Zoom part of this whole curriculum class, but unfortunately it had to come. But overall, though, Belizean study was honestly one of my favorite classes up in JP, and the things I learned and the life lessons and all the like historical background and history, and especially the field trips that we went on, the education field trips, they were really good and whatnot. It really enlightened me as a Belizean what it meant to be one. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Giovanni?
Well, for my last words, I think it's something that we've been saying since the semester started. Um, we've been looking at the stories, we've been learning the stories, but we need to take these stories and create something better with them and form a path that will serve for generations to come as well. The class overall was my favorite, and it's a pity that we have this class in a tertiary level. I would have loved to experience this class maybe in high school or maybe before. And it's a pity that only a select few of us have the opportunity to take on this class. And overall, for my classmates, I wish you all good luck and thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. Cynthia? Cynthia? Cynthia is muted. Let's go on to Alex.
Well, in this history class, I have learned many things. In comparison to that in primary and secondary school, I can say that in those levels we learn the basic about Belize, but this Belizean history class, like I have learned a little, I have gone beyond in learning our history of Belize, that we all shall keep and shall keep telling to our other Belizean people. I would say we should be reminded about our history, culture, tradition, and not like, as I said before, not to leave our history just as a memory of the past, but to make it the present and be the motivation for the future. I really like this class, and it was interesting in knowing different topics. Um, yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Noelia?
So I just want to say thank you for all your attention, for the patience. And these guys helped me a lot because if you don't know, I wasn't born in Belize. I was born in Guatemala. And knowing all these truths about Belizean made me realize that I'm a Belizean because I have lived here for more than 10 years. And Mr. David actually made me realize that I am a true Belizean. And it made me strengthen my real identity then as a Belizean, even though I wasn't born here. So it has helped me a lot and to grow in many ways and to see and keep looking then for my real identity.
Thank you, Noelia. That's a powerful witness to being a Belizean. Cynthia, are you ready?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has been helping us, and also thank you to the teachers that help us to know why we are Belizeans and to help us grow to be more united together.
Thank you, Cynthia. In the last forum, Dr. Penados kind of threw this question out there, if whether thinking Belizean as a Belizean, being part of the Belize nation state, perhaps it's a bit too insular in the sense that it's too confined. It's worth noting that your junior college education, as Maky rightfully said, has proposed us to form you in a way to become leaders, to transform you as individuals, to better serve not only Belize, but the world out there, no? So in a sense, we are molding you to become that true new Belizean woman, man, but at the same time, to be that citizen of the world, to be that citizen of heaven and earth, working to bring heaven closer to earth. Remember, whose are those words? The new Belizean man becoming the citizen of the world of heaven and earth, ever struggling to bring heaven on earth. Who said that? Aaron, you know who said that? Anybody?
George Price.
George Price, George Cagle Price, the new Belizean man and woman, citizen of heaven and on earth, right? Good. So thank you very much for having put the time and effort. You did well. Thank you to Mr. Giovanni and Dr. Penados for collaborating in this in all these forums in this series. We wish you well, students. We will miss you. I will miss you. And as the scripture says, by the fruits you shall know them. So people will know who I am by the fruits you go out there and bear. So thank you very much. I now pass you on to Justin, who will say the final words. And after this, I don't say no more.
I would just like to end by reiterating what has already been said. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the participants. And for those viewing this video at a later time. Thank you for joining us for the third of these forums. I would like to extend a little callback to one of the forums that was hmm? Excuse me. Okay. Yeah. I think just that. That's it. I lost my train of thought.